one of those who would have interacted from a political party level with the Zambian government. A very good evening to you, Mr. Msimang. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Perhaps your thoughts on, upon hearing the news, we've been preparing for this moment, but I think it still comes as a major shock.
Well, these things never cease to shock you. Fact of the matter, though, is that he deserves the peace that he has got now. He ran a beautiful race for a very long time, stayed committed to principle. He was an absolute believer in Pan-Africanism. More than that, he was not going to rest until all of Africa had been liberated.
And I want to talk about that close relationship of our governing party and that support that it received from Zambia, particularly from the leadership of former President Kenneth Kaunda, or KK. Some of the things that I think South Africans really don't know, some of these are anecdotal, but there are some very important details, I think, that are often lost in the retelling of history.
Yes, absolutely true. To start off with, Zambia, relative to South Africa in military and economic strength, was a very weak country. So for him to have allowed so many people who were committed to fighting militarily, to waging a struggle against South Africa, was an act of courage itself. He needed to protect Zambians, and therefore we did not go around carrying guns. Even in our camps, we did not carry guns. But he made it absolutely clear that Zambia was available for us to do our planning, to transit, and do things that needed to be done. He was principled in the sense that sometimes he took decisions that looked unpopular to others, like talking to John Foster, was the prime minister of this place, talking to Ian Smith, hated ruler of what was called Rhodesia, actually inviting him to Zambia. Kaunda would do that, but it was always on the basis of principle. You knew that at the end of the day, if there's any agreement at all, it would be based on the other party agreeing that majority rule would be the order of the day going forward.
I was going to say that he remained an activist on the contemporary issues. I'm thinking of the health crises that we would have faced as a globe, particularly as Africa. He continued to use his own life experiences. I'm thinking of the battle on HIV/AIDS. He was an activist, staunch activist in fighting that.
And very frank about the fact that his family, at a time when people were very afraid of talking about HIV and AIDS, that his family had suffered and lost members to this scourge. And he was an activist, absolutely, of the finest order. That was Kaunda. Kaunda, by the way, I need to say, who, when the United Nations took a decision that South Africa and Rhodesia, as it was called, must be boycotted economically, took the extraordinary step of diverting all his export and import, Zambia's import and export routes, at great cost to other countries. It was an enormous sacrifice, and the Zambian people suffered as a result of that decision. But it was a decision they were going to support because of their solidarity with the unliberated people.
It was said that he did very well in meshing Zambian values with Western socialist Christian values. Would you agree with that? And how would you say that he was able to navigate these philosophies?
Well, simply because his sincerity shone through. He was a very strong believer. He was a Christian, and he made no bones about that. He was what I would call a social democrat. He was very socialistic in his principles. And so he had the courage to stand on any stage. It wouldn't matter whether he was talking to Reagan, President Reagan, or any other person. He was not a communist, by the way, and I'm not saying he was anti-communist, but he stood on a platform of integrity, quite convinced that, I think through his faith, he was convinced that justice would come to Africa one day, and he kept on urging fellow Africans to support, to send the way of justice, to be democratic. He would condemn coups. He became very unpopular at a certain time because he thought in Nigeria the Biafran people who were seceding had a point. He believed that they were right, and he did recognize them. Things were sorted out with the passing of time. I'm just saying this person was very principled. What you saw is what you got, and it didn't matter which side of the globe you came from.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights. Much appreciated. Mavuso Msimang, ANC stalwart, speaking to us about Kenneth Kaunda. He was born on the 28th of April, 1924, to Malawian parents, and it was said he was born between the hills of the watershed Great Luanga and Chambezi River. SABC's international editor Sophie Mkwena still with us, looking back at the life, work, times and teachings of Kenneth Kaunda. So, Sophie, as a journalist, you would have covered some of